All right, so now that we've gotten a little bit familiar with the bouncing ball rig, I have a file set up. It's up on Blackboard with a bit of a basic bounce put in because I want to introduce us to the graph editor real quick. It's what we're going to be going over in class this week, but I still want to give you just a brief introduction to what the heck it is and what's going on with it. Now, before you do any animation, I set this up before I did this animation. We need to go to Windows and no, just kidding. Settings, preferences. If you are working at the school, besides the undo setting, you need to go to the time slider setting. Make sure your playback speed is 24 frames per second. But you also need to go to your animation settings. The settings, not the display settings. And before we had set our tangents. This is the focus of everything we're doing this week and probably from here on out. The tangents decide how the animation goes from one key to the next. And we had it set to linear when we did the space stuff, the solar system, because everything was just going in the same speed the whole time and you didn't want any keys to interfere with anything else. We're doing something different now. So you're going to set it to clamped. We'll go over that what that means in class, but you're also going to set it to weighted tangents. And then you'll hit save, make sure you hit save. And when I do that, I've got up, down, up, down set up. And if I wanted to go a little bit further in the timeline, I could, and I could bring it up. I'm bringing it up less high each time. I want to make sure, there we go. And I right click and I key selected, right? So we're keying only the exact thing that we need. So when I set this up, I only have translate Y. And I want to make sure I go from 14 to 13. Oh, that's way too high. How bouncy do I want this ball? To 7. Okay, so it's starting to fade. And so I've got this bounce that I'm working on where I'd go a little bit further. And I've been going forward. I don't know why I picked this number. It might be too fast or too slow, but about 23 frames. And I can set this to 0. This rig is made well enough that 0 means it's on the ground. Thank you, the person who rigged this. Right click, key selected. So I've added a third bounce. But when I watch it, that is not how something bounces. nothing in the history of bouncing has ever bounced like that. It looks like someone has that on a stick and they're bringing it up and down, and you'll notice it's slowing down at the bottom too. Now it's supposed to slow down at the top, but it's kind of like linearly going down at first and then it slows down when it gets to the bottom, and it's all wrong. But we don't want to try and fix that with more keys, like break down keyframes or something. We want to change how we get from here to this keyframe and then back out to this one. And that is where our graph editor comes in. And our graph editor is Windows Animation Editor Graph Editor. Mine is off to the side. So I'm going to bring it over here. And just like the hypergraph and other things, you can zoom in and out of this the same as you can your general Maya window. You can Alt right click, Alt pan, can't tumble. Sorry, right click and middle click for pan. There we go. But you have to click something that has animation on it to show the curve. So if I click the main control, it will show me the curve for translate Y. Mercifully, it will, if I add something for translate X, it'll maintain the same color structure for anything that's X, Y, and Z. And it'll list anything, whatever you have selected shows up on here. And then if anything is keyed, it shows up underneath. So this doesn't have any keys on it. This does. But this curve is showing what the animation is, the speed of it. The steeper the curve, the faster it's going. The flatter the curve, the slower it's going. So it has to flatten out when it gets to these places it turns around, because it has to turn around. Or does it? So clamped tangents can solve a couple of our problems. I had it set to clamp tangents before. It handled this and this correctly. and then it messed up this and it went past it. That's why it looks like it's going down below the ground, because it is. But we need to tell these keyframes to do something else. And I can use the graph editor to click on these keyframes in here. Oh, don't click the whole curve. But I can click on an individual keyframe and I can press certain buttons to change how it dives into this curve. So I've changed it to a linear tangent, which means it goes straight down in there. Which means now when I press play, now it's still looking pretty mechanical. We'll get to that in a second. But at least now it's not slowing down as it gets to the end. I got to do that for this one too, linear. But it's still looking very mechanical. Well, one reason it's looking mechanical is this. This is all straight. I don't want that. Now I could click a button somewhere. Actually, maybe I can't. I could do flat. There we go. To get it started. Oh, I gotta go back to the beginning. There we go. All right, that's a little better. Oh, it messed up. I forgot. I must have forgot to hit. I changed this to 11, and it didn't register that I did that. There we go. So that helped, right? So we can watch this and we can kind of see, but it's still pretty floaty. So in the end, in many cases, you're gonna have to hand tangent your animation. And we're gonna go into some specifics in class as to what kind of tangents there are, and the fact that I have to keep like sort of linearizing these, and oh, I have to break it. Free tangent length. There we go. There we go. We want it to precipitously fall down into these. You know, you use the presets to get started, to get a general sense of timing. In the end, you do it all by hand. You press a bunch of buttons, you do it all by hand. And in the end, you can start to get now that is a very bouncy ball. I've made it a little bit too hovery, and there's plenty of things I can do to fix that later. But it is actually starting to behave like gravity is affecting it. Yeah, I went a little bit too far. That's okay. It's always better to go too far than not far enough. But this is what the graph editor is for. This is for hand finessing your animation. It is why you should keep as few keys as possible. I cannot stress this enough. Please don't add random keys just for the heck of it. Only add a key when you really need it to be there, because there we go. This is so much easier without having extra keys. And you can see that I'm moving keys as well around the timeline in here, so you can manually move them forward or backwards. It's a lot easier than doing it in here, if I'm being totally honest. There, that's a little bit better. And I don't even have any squash and stretch on here yet, which is another reason it looks probably a little bit ridiculous. But yes, this is the graph editor. The graph of your animation, I believe this is where you are in time, and this is where you are in the y space, which means the speed of the graph, the function of the graph at that point in time is how fast you're going. The steepness of this tells us if you are accelerating or decelerating. Distance traveled is the space underneath. So if you remember any of your trigonometry or calculus, it will help you. Otherwise, we will have to start getting used to the fact that steeper curves mean faster and flatter curves mean slower. and all sorts of buttons that we're going to go over in class that can show us, can kind of give us some shortcuts and help us fix our animation.